I'm Jill.
Hi, I'm Sean.
Hi, I'm Henry.
And I am Alexis, and we are Group 3. So before we start, our group will be discussing COVID-19 and digital inequalities, reciprocal impacts, and mitigation strategies. To begin, Sean will discuss the first point, which is the digital inequalities as a determinant of health. Jill on the second point, which is how COVID-19 potentiates digital inequalities. Heinrich with the third point, which is how digital inequities potentiate vulnerability to COVID-19. And lastly, Alexis with the strategies of mitigation. So before Sean starts, I will discuss some definition of terms for you guys to be able to follow along with the presentation. So the first one is digital inequalities. So with this definition presented on the slide, I would say that this is one word to describe online class as there are students from different places or provinces who do not have access to the internet or technology. The second is social inequalities. So these are unequal opportunities or treatment, or rather, it is the limiting of the social status. And lastly, vulnerable population. These are groups or communities who are at high risk for poor health, where it is hard for the people to attain their needs and wants. Next.
So let us start by discussing digital inequalities as a determinant of health. Now, digital inequalities could be theorized in many ways. The question of having access to technical equipment and stable connection may be essential, yet it is not the limiting factors alone, nor even the concept of who is having what or who is having not. Rather, the text has presented four proximal factors that affects the degree of usage of technology efficiently and effectively. The first factor is the technical means. This aims to explain what I have mentioned earlier, the equipment that one can access and the reliability of it connecting to the internet. Whether the gadget or equipment you possess could supply the needs or demands of the world we live in. Second is the autonomy of use. Second factor talks about the condition of location where the technology is accessed. Third is social support networks. This talks about having access to what we call tech support from experts that handle this kind of equipment. Lastly, the fourth point would be experience. Experience plays a factor in enabling a person to be familiar with the technology and know its benefits. Now, knowing that the factors that make one experience digital inequality, comes the question, how does it affect or determine one's health? Now, when we talk about health, we talk about the physical, mental, and social health of an individual. Having limited access to digital technologies generally implies limited access to services, resources, and information, and their potential benefits. From there, we could easily break down or see the effects that it brings to our health. So that includes the online classes, digital or contactless payments, and who or how could it benefit from one individual to another. Now, as a digital inequality is a form of social health or a threat to social health. It is an emerging form of social exclusion, which digital exclusion can be contributed. Now, being digitally excluded has consequences on health determinants such as educations, work, and social networks, which impacts contribute in return to maintain limited access and use of technology. Now, this phenomenon is called the vicious or digital vicious cycle. Now, I'm passing the floor to Jill for the second point.
So now I'll be discussing how COVID-19 potentiates digital inequalities. So my first point is amenity to necessity. Since the start of the pandemic, the use of technology has become a necessity rather than an amenity. It has become a platform to it has become a platform to communicate, educate, gather information, and get the latest news and many more. Our lives have changed since COVID-19 with social distancing and other precautions. The things we usually do on a daily basis are now prohibited. Therefore, the new way of interacting and communicating with one another is through the use of technology. My next point is low income versus high income households. Based on the article, low income households suffer from the immediate and long term economic consequences of the COVID 19 crisis more severely. Since they have low income, they can't afford to buy the latest gadgets, or therefore leaving them with their old gadgets that generates longer delays. On the other hand, high income households have more opportunities and advantages, especially with accessing the latest technology. Next point is the access to technologies. Since not everyone is privileged enough to avail internet services or the latest gadgets, it becomes a hindrance for most people, especially the low income households, since technology is now used in our everyday needs, from meetings to online classes or to paying bills. Then my last point is the adaptation to new technologies. Lastly, since everything has changed due to COVID 19, everyone is now adjusting to the new normal. As I said, instead of having meetings in person, the new way is by holding it in a conference call through Zoom, Google Meet, or other platforms. In terms of education, we now have online classes where students and teachers interact through um, different online platforms as well. But it is very different from having face-to-face classes, since they have limitations in teaching and the lack of resources to um, further explain lessons. So next, Heinrich.
Yes. How digital inequities potentiate vulnerability to COVID-19. So, yeah. Women. Women form 70% of workers in the health and social sector. For example, in our house, if you get sick or got infected, who will take care of you? Most of the time, your mother will be taking care of you, or if not, your housemate, which is also a woman. So, older adults. As you get older, your risk for severe illness from COVID-19 increases as well. Old people increase their risk for severe illness, COVID-19, such as having underlying conditions. In fact, 8 out of 10 COVID-19 related deaths reported in the United States have been among adults aged 65 years and older. Homeless population in low-income households. So, one of the main reasons are because of their houses. Most of the time, it's congested. So, if there are lots of people coming in and out of your house, it increases the risk of getting infected by the COVID-19. So, ayun, napansin ko din, they lack proper equipment. Yeah. Although all age groups are at risk of contracting COVID-19, women, older adults, homeless population, and low-income households have a higher risk of getting infected by COVID-19. So, vulnerability to the virus itself. Since the spread is fast, government and official agencies such as World Health Organization has been spreading information on how to avoid getting infected and infecting others as well. However, some of the most vulnerable social groups, including the old ones, the homeless, recent immigrants, or rural residents, those who are the most difficult to reach if digital media serves as the main route of communication. So, social media nowadays serves as a tool that gives information to people that helps them to be more vulnerable to the virus. So, e-health literacy is defined as the ability to seek, find, understand, and appraise health information from electronic sources and apply. So, people are more vulnerable to COVID-19 contamination or propagation because they have a harder time accessing, understanding, and applying protective measures. So, given that the requirements of home confinement are understood, other factors might weaken the possibility to actualize recommended behaviors. These difficulties are linked to the level of digital skills, social networks composition, and financial constraints. With the impossibility to realize some everyday life essential errands or activities. So, ayun, I know you also find suitable alternatives such as online grocery shoppings, having someone to get groceries for you guys. So, like Grab, we use it as a tool to make our lives easier and yeah, to buy things for us. Vulnerability cautions of the crisis. Internet plays a crucial role in the rapid and diffuse growth of fake news or other information from unrecognized sources that might go against government and public health recommendations. So, social media. Social media helps us impose various degrees of social distancing measures and virtual spaces. It offers means of communication that can be used to maintain social bonds between family members, friends, coworkers, or community members, and strengthen durable social bonds. So, social media can also help us earn money and keep us entertained during the pandemic. With the help of social media, we also can maintain or have a good mental health by keeping in touch with our friends and family. So, mental health, COVID-19 crisis. The pandemic increases psychological distress for the population, especially for the people already suffering from mental health issues. The occurrence of domestic violence might also increase during the confinement period, according to Glover. Implied in the above, the COVID-19 pandemic will bring a rather high amount of loss for many people, whether it is jobless, loss of social bonds, loss of normality, or loss of a loved one. Indeed, the COVID-19 crisis has already made a high number of victims around the world.
So, with the last point, the authors discuss different strategies that will mitigate the pandemic on digital inequalities and the digital inequalities impacts on the pandemic, where these strategies mentioned involve different levels of decision in order to reach the goal of actionability. So, the first strategy, 4.1, is a strategies targeting individuals' technology use. So, the first is increasing physical access to connected devices and internet. So the first strategy points out the importance of identifying the areas where people do not have enough access to the use of technology or least access to the internet connection. So in the article, the authors mentioned how governments and telecommunication companies should put effort to increase the coverage of internet networks and how authorities should consider places to allow public access to the internet. So, to further expound on this point, I will mention two recent articles in the Philippines. So, the first would be from last October 19, 2020, where Globe converted school buses in Manila into mobile Wi Fi hubs for students and teachers. While the second article was last October 22, 2020, where PLDT Group donated devices to DepEd in its School in a Bag to boost e learning.
So next one is increasing digital literacy. So there are several strategies, both long-term and short-term, that can help increase digital literacy. In household, family, community peer support, schools, government, promoted, and corporations, digital literacy can be promoted through videos, tutorials, or courses online. Through promoting digital literacy, people, especially those who have little experience in using technology or the internet, can now learn how to use it well and properly. And an example is by also updating the curriculum of the students. So next.
So, the next strategy is increasing access to social support. So this strategy mentions the creation of support platforms such as applications, websites, or communication features in order for people to have connections due to the lockdown. So with the lockdown that began last March 2020, it has been a struggle for some people to communicate with their loved ones, and that this lockdown has affected the mental health of people. So therefore, this strategy also aims to build an online community for people to gain engagement and the creation of communication features and apps for a social bond to exist. So the use of social media has also increased social support in a way that organizations online are active, and through that, this is one way for them to promote and raise awareness to the people. Next.
So next one is increasing the diffusion of the messages. Um, this strategy aims to increase the redundancy of information. If an information is repetitive, people will see this as relevant. This strategy helps them focus on the message and the, what the author wants the audience to understand. So basically, increasing this strategy just focuses on what the author, what the author wants the readers to see based on his point of view. Next.
So the next strategy is increasing the control over the quality of messages. So this strategy focuses on being able to detect and block erroneous information and fake news systematically, where the article stated different ways to focus on the important news. So such ways mentioned include increasing the visibility of validated sources or for government or validated public health organizations or ranked first in search engines.
The messages. This strategy helps the readers understand the meaning of the message by simplifying terms, increasing their readability, and increasing their actionability. So instead of using information not related to to the topic or to the message, they should use terms that are familiar to everyone and not use deep scientific terms. Or they if if you will be using scientific terms, there should be always much clearer explanation to it. This strategy is important, especially in addressing health related information.
With the last strategy, it's the increasing the accessibility of the messages. So this strategy aims for people to have access to information. However, with the global pandemic that we are currently facing and that there are so many people who cannot access news with technology, in order to ensure that people receive information, I believe that one way to do that is for barangay officials to reach out to the people. And therefore, with our conclusion, with global pandemic where cases are increasing up to this day, it shows how the world was not prepared. In the Philippines, cases are still increasing due to the lack of testing kits. Therefore, it is impossible to have face-to-face classes even if students are required to follow protocols as it still feels unsafe and that the approved vaccines are still not fully prepared to be sent out worldwide. Therefore, with this and in relation to our topic, online classes continue and that as a group, we are here to remind you to be thankful for what you have as there are people who do not have access to the use of technology or the internet. And once again, I am Alexis.
I am Jill.
And I am Sean.
And I am Henry. And we are Group 3 signing off.